Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you all will hit that subscribe button and like this video if you do like it. So this will be the second video in this series. So in the previous video we talked about how you can get data from the NHL API, and I do recommend watching that video before you watch this one. So today we will be looking at how you can scrape data from the Shift HTML reports rather than getting the Shift data from the API. So there are a few advantages to doing it this way. There's also a lot of disadvantages, but the main reason why you'd like to get the data from the HTML reports rather than from the API is that it updates live. So if you want to do something with live data, then you would have to get the data from the HTML reports. Regarding the play-by-play data, that updates live in the API, so you don't have to get that from the HTML reports. So this is why we're focusing on the Shift data. So before you get started, you should absolutely go visit my website, hockey-statistics.com. There's a lot of articles here and visualizations and data. You can go check it out. So that would be my first go-to if I was you. So I just opened the file that we worked on in the first video. So this one, you can select the date and then it will fetch the schedule, the play-by-play data, and the shift data based on that. So we'll just be working in this same file here. But now, instead of getting the data from the API, we want to scrape it from the HTML reports. So let's just try and open the Power Query editor first. Okay, so here we go. This is what it looks like. So let's just, in fact, let's go to the internet first and check out the HTML report. So this is what they look like, and this is an old game in 2007, 2008. Then you have TH stands for team home, and then you have the last 6 digits of the game ID. So you have the season, home team, last 6 digits of the game ID. So if we were to say TV, then it stands for team visiting. So this would be the away team. So that would be, or the visitor team perhaps. So this would be the LA Kings, and the other one was Anaheim. So that's what the HTML reports look like. And it has all the information that we need. Well, except for player IDs, but we'll talk about that later. So we want to set up a scraper that just goes and fetches this data. So it should be obvious that because there's 2 different URLs, one for the home team, one for the visitor team, we have to get 2 URLs for each game. But let's just, this is what it looks like. Then we can go to the Power Query here, and we'll go to the schedule one. So this one has the games based on the selection that we chose in the Excel workbook. So we're actually just gonna copy this one, say duplicate, and then we'll call this one Shift Data HTML. Let's do it like that. Okay, so this schedule table here has all the information that we need in order to create our URLs. So we do have the season, we do have the game ID, we do have the teams, we do have the away team and the home team. So we need to have 2 rows for each game in order to get the correct number of URLs. But we'll start off by just selecting the columns that are relevant to us. So actually we don't need the date. We need the game ID, we need the season. Let's just unselect all. game ID season, we need the away team, and we need the home team. So this is all we need in order to get our URLs. So there's a few ways you can do this, but I think the easiest way is to just select away team and home team, and then we can unpivot these. So we'll just say unpivot only selected columns. So what this does is it adds columns based on these two columns here. So now you have it, the away team is Montreal, the home team is Philadelphia. So now I added it so that you have 2 rows for each game ID. You see here it's the same game ID. So this is important because we are going to need this when we are creating our URLs. So we can just start off by adding a conditional column. And it should be based on the attribute, and we can call it venue. So if attribute equals away team, then we'll say it's TV for team visiting. And if it's not that, then it's TH for home team. Okay, so now we have a column with that information, and that's what we need because we need to know if it's the visitor or the home team. Okay, so we'll just make this into text, and then we can get the season. We already have that one. It needs to be a text. The game ID needs to be a text. So let's create our URLs. We only need the last 6 digits here, but we'll just put that in directly. So we'll just copy this URL, go add a custom column, and let's call this one link shift HTML. And let's just copy it. So instead of having the season here, we'll just add the column season. And we need to add a and, otherwise it won't work. And season. And this one. And instead of TV, we'll put in the venue. And instead of the 6 digits here, we'll put in the last digits of our game ID column. So we can do that by saying text in the end. So now it takes a number of digits from the end of the string, from the end of the text. So we'll just put in this one, and we'll say we want to take it from the game ID, and we want the 6 last digits. So this should work, and then we'll just add in the .htm in the end. So I think this should work actually. And we'll just make it into a text and see what happens. So this right here looks correct. So now all we have to do is we have to do the exact same as we did in the previous video, meaning we have to create a temp table in order to create a function, and then we have to make a parameter so that we can create that function, and then we can invoke this function on this column here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just go to home, and we'll just add this as a web source, just put in the URL, and this should work. It's not an API call, so it is a little bit less clean, but Power Query can handle it and can find all the tables and the data. So there's a lot of tables here. So it's all about picking the right one. And I already know that table 10 is actually the right one. This one has all the information that we need. As you can see, it's not very clean, but we'll just get this data and then we'll clean it a little bit afterwards. So this is what the data looks like. And actually, our function should only be getting the data, and then we'll do the cleaning afterwards. So our function needs to end here. So all we have to do is we have to add a parameter. We could call this one link shift HTML, and it has to be a text. I will just put in the URL as the starting point. Okay, so now we have a parameter, and we need to put in that parameter here. Instead of having this fixed URL, we'll just put in the parameter link shift HTML, and it works. So nothing changed, meaning it worked. So now that we have a parameter in this table, we can create a function based on the table. So we'll just say create function, and we'll call it function shift HTML. So now we have a function, and when we put in a URL and press invoke, it fetches that table 10 based on the URL. So we can try it just to test it out, and it works. So let's just delete it now. And again, this table was just a temporary table in order to build our function, so we'll just delete this one as well. And now we can invoke our function on this. So basically, it takes this value, runs the function, then it takes this value, runs the function, then it takes this value, runs the function, and so on. So that's how it works. So let's just mark the correct column, go add column, go invoke custom function, and we'll just pick the shift HTML function and the correct column and say OK. And this should work. It takes a little bit longer than when we call the API, simply because it's slower and we're making more calls. But it works. It gets the data. So you can see there's a lot of columns here and they don't have any names, but we'll just expand them. So this needs a little bit of cleaning, and this is not a video about cleaning, but we'll just do a little bit because it's not that difficult to do. So I think the first thing is we need to rename these so that they make sense. So this one is shift number, and this one is period, and this one is start, end, and the duration, we don't want that actually, because we have the start and we have the end, so there's no need to get the duration. This one, I'm not quite sure what this means. I think there was a goal scored while he was on the ice or something like that. We don't need that one. Then we have this one and this one. So we can use this one we can call this one player. And yeah, that's it. All the other columns we don't need. We don't want this. So the first thing we need is we need to have the player name all the way down so that we know that this shift here was by this player. So this is thankfully super easy to do. You just go transform, say fill, and then you fill down. So now it fills down, fills down, fills down. Then there's something weird going on here. But then the new player starts and it fills down. So now all the shifts, we have the actual player in that row as well. Okay, so far so good. Now obviously there's a lot going on and we don't want to have. So there's some empty rows here, and there's this row that holds a lot of information. You can see it down here. But we don't want that. So we'll just... So how can we get this to be correct? Well, there's a few ways I suppose we could do this. But the easiest way, I think, is to make this column here into a numbers column, because then you can see this is not a number, so this will be an error. As this is not a number, that will be an error. This is not a number, that will be an error. So every time it's not a number, it will make an error. So let's just try and do that. Say this is a whole number. You can see error, error. There's a null there, but error, error, error. So this is actually super easy, because all the places where we don't want the rows, there's an error, so we can just remove errors. So it's just go here, pick this one, and say remove errors. So now we have all of these. Now there's still some blank values, but other than that it looks correct, so we'll just filter it so that there are no blank arrows. And now I think we have all the rows that we actually want. And we have the name. Looks correct. So let's just let's just remove all the columns that we don't want. We don't want this one, we don't want this one, we don't want this one. We can also, let's remove some of these. Yeah. So let's just go to the beginning, by the way. So you have game ID, you have season, you have attribute. Let's call this one venue. And let's call this one team. And then you have the shift data here. So this is what we scrape. So you have shift number, meaning it's the player shift number by Mike Matheson. So this was his first shift and this was his 26th shift in that game. Okay, so that works. So we can end up by just cleaning this one a little bit. So here you got both the jersey number and the name, first name and last name. So let's clean that a little bit. So we can just add a custom column, say jersey, like that. And in order to do that, we need to get the text before the space. So it's text before delimiter, and now we'll just put in the player, and the delimiter is a space. So I think this should work. Yes, so it gives back the number 8 and 11 and 13 and so on. It works. So then we need to get the names as well, the first name and the last name, and we'll put it in just one column. So the first name is after the delimiter, comma, space. That's always where it comes. So let's just say name. Let's say text after delimiter, and the text is player, and the delimiter is now a comma and a space. So this should give us the first name. Works. But let's just add the second name as well. So then we'll say and we'll put in a space. And then we need to get the last name. So let's just look at this. So the last name is between a space and a comma. So we'll just say text between delimiters, player, and the first delimiter is a space, and the end delimiter is a comma. So this should work, I hope. Mike Matheson, Brendan Gallagher, Mitchell, Stevens, and so on and so on and so on. So this works as it should. So let's just remove this player column. And other than that, I'm pleased with what we've done today. So we'll just select it all and detect data type. And everything looks correct. And then we'll just load it. So let's just start off by creating a connection only, and then we'll add it later on. So now we can go here and we can add it to the data model, and let's just put it in a table as well. Then we can compare the Shift HTML and the Shift API data. So again, this is a little bit slower than when you're calling the API, but it does work. And it's not that slow, by the way. So the first thing that you should see right away is that there's a difference in number of rows. So in the shift data, so in this shift data from the API, you do have some zeros here where the start time and the end time are the same. You don't have these in the HTML data, so you can ignore these because there are no shifts there. So that's one of the reasons why there's a difference here, but there's also some, so let's say that's 17, that can't explain the full difference because there's 21 row difference. So this explains most of it, but in the shift data from the API, you do have some duplicate values along the way. There are some errors there and there are some duplicate values that you need to clean up. You don't have those in the HTML data. So in that way it's more clean, but the big problem with the HTML data is that we don't have the player ID. So we only have the name, so we need to somehow get the player ID based on the name, and that's not quite as easy as it sounds because the names in these HTML reports may not be the same as the names we have here. So for instance, someone like Mitch Marner is called Mitchell Marner in some reports and Mitch Marner in other reports. So we don't really know how to, so it's not consistent, and that makes it a bit more difficult. But it is possible to get those player IDs, but it's a bit more complicated. Anyway, I wanted to show that you can just scrape the data from the HTML reports as well, and it's not more difficult to do than calling the API, especially not if you're doing it in Power Query. If you were to do this in a tool like in a coding language like Python, for instance, it would be a lot more difficult to scrape the data from a website versus calling the data from an API. But in Power Query, it's pretty much the same approach. There's no real difference there. Anyway, this is what I wanted to show. I wanted to show how you could get the data and it works. And if we select another day, let's say 09, and press refresh, it should refresh all of it. First the play-by-play data, the shift data, the schedule. It takes a little while. Okay, so it got the shift data HTML, but for some weird reason it didn't update the schedule or the play-by-play data. Let's just try it one more time, see what happens. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't get all of the data the first time, but it works now. So you can see there's 10 games there, and now it's getting the data, and you can see it's much slower at getting the HTML data compared to the play-by-play and shift data from the API. But that's just how it is. Okay, so now we got the data, and again, like I said, there's a difference in number of rows in the API shift data and the HTML shift data. But that is what it is. I think we'll end the video right here, and in the next video I want to look at how you can scrape a full season worth of data from the API. So instead of just getting data from a single day, we want to get data for a full season. It's pretty much the same approach, but it's much more relevant if you want to do data analysis, not just on a day-to-day basis, but want to do modeling on a full season or 16 full seasons or whatever. And it's actually quite quick to do, to get the data for a full season from the API. It's not that complicated, it's not that slow of a process. But we'll do that in the next video. So see you until then.